This is lecture 56A in the ABCs of Communism series. This will be chapter 59 in next year's series. Volume 3 will be the Korean chapter in Volume 3. And our subject today is primitive communism in Korea and how it evolved right up to the eve of the slave stage. There will be 4 lectures in this Korean series. Now, just to begin with, I want to mention that Korea is a subject of special interest to me because when I was in U.S. Army Intelligence Training School at Fort Holabird, Maryland in winter and spring of 1960, we had a course on combat intelligence that lasted for about 8 weeks. And the Korean War in 1960, as you know, had only been over a few years. So we had access to many of the soldiers and Marines who had fought there. And one of the things we did, among other things in combat intelligence, is to interview people that have just returned from the scene, either prisoners or in this case our own soldiers, and ask them specific questions. And we'd have a list of questions and so on we wanted to go through. And in the course of that, there were many humorous incidents. I remember one sergeant in particular who came in drunk and said that he tried to stay drunk the whole time he was in Korea. And I asked him, well, you must have gotten pretty cold out there. I could understand you drinking a lot. He said, oh yeah. And he said, there were many nights I had to sleep with my feet in my buddy's armpits and his in mine, and our hands in each other's crotches, just so we didn't fucking freeze to death during the night. And I got to a certain point. I said, well, when the Chinese surprised you guys with 5 field armies and you were surrounded, what did you do? And he said, I got the hell out of there. I ran as fast as I could to the port so I could get evacuated. There were a lot of funny stories like that happened, that came out during the course of these interviews. But it was interesting in many ways to me that was going on at that particular time, and to think about what's going on right now. Because, you know, the Chinese warned Washington the other day that Korea is not the Middle East, by which they meant 2 things. First of all, they are no more likely to back off in their support of North Korea today than Mao Zedong was in 1950 when he sent Chinese field armies to support the volunteers and Chinese field armies to support the North Koreans. And that's when China was weak. Now China is powerful today and in a far better position. The other thing he meant, and I think by the time we finished the 4th lecture, the other thing China meant was this guy Kim and his whole bunch there in Korea, they will not hesitate to use their atomic weapons and sink your fleet and wipe out your troops in the nearby areas if you have the audacity to attack them. So don't think they're going to be any kind of pushover like these Arabs over in the Middle East. Well, anyway, now I want to get to this question of primitive communism in Korea and how it evolved up and through until the slave stage. And we'll start with a little comment on the geological prehistory. The oldest rocks in Korea date to the Precambrian Yonchon system. From Seoul, they extend to Yonchon-gun in a northeasterly direction. The Yonchon Formation is divided into upper and lower parts and is composed of biotite, quartz, feldspar, and schist, marble, lime silicate, quartzite, graphite, schist, mica quartz, feldspar, schist, mica schist, quartzite, oggen gneiss, and garnet-bearing granitic gneiss. We're going to stop here for a moment so that the camera can move over and take a look at the Korean Peninsula. Okay, now Seoul is right here, and these Korean rocks we're talking about are extending up this way through the peninsula. Pyongyang is right there. Now that's another very important city in Korean history, which we will be talking about off and on throughout. Now the Korean Peninsula, this entire thing, was an active geological zone from the Paleozoic through the Mesozoic. Its many mountain ranges were formed from orogenies of those periods. Orogenies are mountain building episodes. The peninsula stabilized in the Cenozoic. The major Mesozoic formations include the Gyeongsang supergroup, a series of geological episodes in which biotite granites, shales, sandstones, conglomerates, andesite, basalt, rhyolite, and tuff, that's volcanic tuff, were laid down over most of the present-day Gyeongsang-do province. Now, in terms of Paleolithic archaeology, the artifacts of Homo sapiens date back 700,000 years before present in Korea. They are found north of Hamgyong, south of Pyongyang, Gyeonggi, and north and south Chungcheong provinces of Korea. The Seokjang-ri is an archaeological site near Gwangju, Gyeongseongnam-do province. It contains stone tools of a lower Paleolithic age, and they were unearthed in the lower levels of the site. Bifacial chopper or chopping tools were excavated. Hand axes and cleavers produced in later eras were uncovered in higher levels at that Seokjang-ri site. In Seokjang-ri and in other riverine sites, there are stone tools with Paleolithic types made of fine-grained rocks such as quartzite, porphyry, obsidian, chert, and felsite. These manifest Acheulean, Lavoisian, and Mousterian characteristics. Those of the chopper tradition are simpler in shape and chipped from quartzite and pegmatite. Seokjang-ri's middle layers show that humans hunted with these bola or missile stones. Now, from Jomo and Jocheon caves, hunting tools have also been recovered. In your book, though, you'll be able to see these probably more clearly, but one is made from the radius of a hominid in association with hunting and food preparation tools of animal bones. The shells of edible marine origin were also uncovered, and during the Middle Paleolithic period, humans lived in these caves and at the Durobong site near Cheongju. From these cave sites, fossil remains of rhinoceros, cave bear, brown bear, hyena, and deer of the Sudaxi gray variety, all extinct species, were excavated. Hand axes and cleavers have been found at a number of sites near Cheongakni that date to at least 100,000 years ago. Now, Homo fossils have been found in 9 separate sites on the Korean Peninsula. Ryonggok Cave in the DPRK, that's the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or what is the Cap Press over here is normally called North Korea, has exposed the remains of at least 5 Homo sapiens individuals. A Homo sapiens child burial has been discovered in Hungsu Cave in the ROK, that is the Republic of Korea. That's South Korea. That fossil has been dated to 40,000 years ago. Radiocarbon dates for the Advanced Paleolithic run between 40,000 and 30,000 BP. At Locality 1 at Seokjang-ri, excavators excavated some human hairs of Mongoloid type along with lamanitic and manganese pigments near and around a hearth. Rock figurines of dog, tortoise, and bear are found in zones radiocarbon dated to 20,000 BP. BP is before present. Several years ago, researchers said they had found evidence for 15,000-year-old burnt rice grains at a site in South Korea. Recent agricultural origin studies in China, such as we discussed in previous lectures on China, beginning with McNeish and Libby and also Professor Chen, continuing to this day, lead me to expect that agricultural beginnings in Korea will be of a similar age. The period of 20,000 to 10,000 BP belongs at the end of a long stage of broad-spectrum wild resource exploitation, dominated by hunting and gathering of both terrestrial and marine resources. The earliest known Korean pottery dates back to 10,000 BP, and evidence of Mesolithic pit-comb-ware culture or Yungamum pottery is found throughout the peninsula. An example of Yungamum-era site is Jeju-do. Jeomun, or comb-patterned pottery, is found after 9,000 BP, and pottery with comb patterns over the whole vessel is found concentrated at sites in west-central Korea, where a number of settlements such as Amsterdam existed. Julmun pottery bears basic design and form similarities to that of Mongolia and the Amur and Sungari river basins of Manchuria, the Jomon culture in Japan, and the Baiyue in southern China and Southeast Asia. This is the last phase of broad-spectrum wild resource exploitation and the beginning of primary reliance on cultivation and agriculture, that is, the beginning of the tribal agricultural stage. The Jomun comb-patterned pottery period features decorated pottery vessels that make up a large part of the pottery assemblage from 6,000 to 4,000 BP. This is pottery produced in the individual household of a society, of a tribal family farm of cultivators, in a period of transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture via the small-scale cultivation of plants. The simple chiefdom stage emerges in the Mamoon pottery period that spans this beginning simple chiefdom economy and its eventual evolution into an intensive agriculture and socially ranked political economy. It evolves into an intensive agriculture and professional specialization begins by 3500 BP, after which it intensifies through 2300 BP. These people had a multitude of crops in the early Mamoon period, that is 3500 to 2850 BP. Plain cooking and storage vessels are a large part of the pottery assemblage, 2850 to 2550 BP. The Mamoon pottery period is the archaeological period when people in southern Korea adopted intensive dry field and paddy field agriculture. And this was followed by the advanced theocratic chiefdom stage. The first ATC diagnostic criteria, including megalithic burials, mass-produced pottery, and large settlements, are found in the Liao River Basin and North Korea by 3800 to 3500 BP, bronze technology by 2700 BP, and the ATC stage spreads southwards, so that bronze typology shows ATC emergence in the southern part of the peninsula by 2300 years ago. In general, big chiefs emerged before the middle Mamoon, which is 2850 to 2250. Bronze production became increasingly important after 2700 BP. Ostentatious elite rank burials appear in the late Mamoon, 2550 to 2300 BP. The late Mamoon marks the end of the chiefdom transition from primitive communism to the servitude epoch and its beginning stage of slavery. All ATCs have a unifying religion, that is, the mechanism for ensuring that the masses of common farming families voluntarily give over authority to the ruling theocrats. In Volume 1, we saw that it was the An cult in Mesopotamia, the solar cult in Egypt, the oracle bone cult in China, the Olmec cult in Mesoamerica, and the Shivin cult in the Central Andes, and in Volume 2, we pursued these New World ATC religions in more detail, nation by contemporary nation. In the preceding chapter of this volume, we have gone through the Chinese oracle bone religion. It will be no surprise to you, students of the fundamentals of historical materialism, then, to learn that the Korean Peninsula and its ATCs also had a unifying religion. It is the Gojoseon cult. Those of you with special interest in the Gojoseon cult will find much information about the mythological Gojoseon personage on the internet or in any university library. For our purposes, it shall suffice to mention the existence of the Gojoseon cult in the Korean ATC stage. You should expect its remnant ideological icons to appear in the historical literature once the ATCs, such as Gojoseon, transform into primitive slave stage societies. Summary of this chiefdom transition from primitive communism to slavery is that archaeological evidence from Songgok-ri, Dapyeong, Igamdong, and elsewhere show that the Mamoon era was the era in which chiefdoms arose, expanded, and collapsed. The increasing presence of long-distance trade, an increase in local conflicts, and the introduction of bronze and iron metallurgy define the end of the Mamoon in 2300 BP. And thus we come to slave stage Korea. Slavery as a socio-cultural evolutionary stage in Korea began by 300 BC. You will want to remember that slave stage societies never feature the entire working population enslaved, at least not until their moribund phases. The diagnostic is that the lowest common denominator for what must be paid for labor, slave or free, is what it costs to keep the slave alive. The transition from the archaeological late Bronze to early Iron Age in Korea begins in 350 BC, and this corresponds to the ATC stage, beginning with the early phase of Gojoseon. Then the first slave stage kingdoms emerge in the middle Gojoseon, and simultaneously slavery arose in the Jin kingdom period in the south of the peninsula, and the Proto Three Kingdoms period of the 1st to 4th centuries BC. Korean slavery began to decline in ruling class favor during the AD 900s. It reasserted itself as the preferred mode of servitude in the late Goryeo period. The general crisis of slavery meaning the increasing cost of state power required to keep these slaves in servitude, had come to its zenith when Korea experienced too many slave rebellions. These many rebellions came at so high a cost that by AD 900, Korea needed a feudal solution, such as China had accepted in 221 BC. Proto History is a term in archaeology used to describe a time when written sources, as well as archaeological ones, exist side by side because in some part of the area being described, writing has emerged. On the Korean Peninsula, the proto-historical period runs from 300 BC to AD 550. The polities described in ancient Samguk Sagi occur in this temporal period. The historical period in Korea begins in AD 550. This written history begins with the arrival of Buddhist priests on the Silk Road. The time of their entry into the Korean Three Kingdoms features the adoption of Chinese writing in those kingdoms. This is the earliest so far recovered written historical record in Old Korean. Now we want to take a look at the Gojoseon Kingdom. Gojoseon, or Joseon, was an ancient Korean slave stage kingdom. The addition of Go, meaning ancient, distinguishes it from the other kingdoms called Joseon. The supposed foundation of Gojoseon is recorded in the Samguk Yusa that was written in AD 1281 and other similarly dated Korean books. However, this Gojoseon is a mythical one, or this origin. Its start with the 2333 BC arrival of Gija speaks for itself. Now in 400 BC, the real Gojoseon kingdom existed with its capital in Liaoning. That city was moved to Pyongyang in 250 BC. At that time, in the south of the peninsula, the Jin kingdom was emerging. In 108 BC, the Han dynasty of China invaded and conquered Wyman Joseon. The Han established 4 military commands to administer Gojoseon territory, and in AD 313, the Goguryeo conquered the entire 4-command area. And that brings us to the slave stage kingdom of Goguryeo, or Korea. Goguryeo, founded in 37 BC, was also known as Goryeo. It eventually became the modern name of Korea. The first king was Jumong, titled as Dong Myang Song. King Teo appears as the next dictator of the government of the kingdom. Goguryeo was the first peninsular kingdom to adopt Buddhism as the state religion in AD 372 during King Soserim's reign. Now, in the AD 400s, Korea evolved from a kingdom to an empire, claiming respect among the great powers in East Asia. Under Gwanggaeto the Great and his son Jiangsu, the Goguryeo regime expanded into Manchuria, parts of Inner Mongolia, parts of Russia, and took the present-day Gangnan part of Seoul from Baekje. Gwanggaeto and Jiangsu conquered Baekje and Silla during their administrations. They incorporated the 3 kingdoms. Jiangsu's 79 years witnessed the perfecting of the Korean slave stage polity. Now, as in all slave stage dictatorships, the Korean one featured military officials in charge. These men contested China for control of the entire Korean peninsula. Accordingly, they were often at war with the Chinese Empire. The high point of their success against China was the Goguryeo-Sui War, in which they defeated a 1 million-man Chinese army. That event contributed to the Sui dynasty regime's collapse. However, this was a contest where Korea had to win every time, and China just once, no matter which faction ruled China. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, at the Jin Kingdom, the Kingdom of Jin occupied the southern Korea Peninsula during the 2nd and 3rd centuries BC. The Gojoseon Kingdom ran along its northern border. Its capital was somewhere south of the Han River. It was succeeded by the Samhan Confederacies, each of which claimed to be successors of the Jin Kingdom. Jin archaeological diagnostics are those of the Korean bronze dagger culture. This succeeded the Liaoning bronze dagger culture after 250 BC. The most abundant finds from this culture have been in southwestern Korea's Chongjong and Jola regions. Jin was based in the same area. Artifacts of the culture are similar to Bayue in China and found throughout southern Korea. Some types were exported to the Yayoi people of Kyushu, Japan. The Jin kingdom was a federation of small kingdoms, much like the subsequent Samhan. The kingdom sent ambassadorial ministers to the court of the Han dynasty in China. The kingdom's opening of direct contacts with China was for trade in Chinese iron metallurgy. Now, to establish secure land and maritime relations with China, the Jin kingdom had to handle Gojoseon. He tried to prevent direct contact between Jin and China. King Jun of Gojoseon is reported to have fled to Jin after Wyman seized his throne. Wyman established Wyman Joseon. Chinese scholars refer to Geguk or Gemaguk as Jin in the kingdom of armored horses. In 18 BC, Baekje had been founded by Anjo, a Goguryeo prince and the third son of the founder of Goguryeo. Baekje was a member of the Mahan Confederacy in the Han River Basin near present-day Seoul. It expanded into the southwest, that is Jeongeon and Jeolla provinces of the peninsula, becoming significant militarily. And in the process, Baekje came into fierce confrontation with Goguryeo and the Chinese Four Commands. In AD 26, Goguryeo conquered Gemaguk, that is Jin. The Jin kingdom evolved into the Jinhan, Samhan, Ryunhan, and Mahan kingdoms. And that brings us to the Samhan period of Korean history, which is also termed the Three Kingdoms. It comprised the confederacies of Mahan, Jinhan, and Banyan on the central and southern Korean peninsula during the final century BC and the early centuries AD. These confederacies were eventually absorbed into two of the three kingdoms of Korea by the 4th century AD. The Samhan period is a subdivision of the three kingdoms. The Samhan kingdom comes from Sam, which is the Sino-Korean word meaning three, and Han, which is a Korean word meaning great, one, grand, large, much, or many. Han was transliterated into Chinese characters, but is unrelated with the Han in Han Chinese, or the Chinese kingdoms and dynasties called Han. Ma means south, Beon means shining, and Jin means east. So the names of these confederacies are reflected in the current name of South Korea, Daehanminguk, the Great Han People's Nation. The Samhan confederacies are thought to have formed around the time of the fall of Gojoseon in northern Korea in 108 BC. This is the same period when the state of Jin in southern Korea also disappears from written records. By the 4th century, Mahan was fully, that is AD, Mahan was fully absorbed into the Baekje kingdom, Jinhan into the Silla kingdom, and Byonhan into the Gaya Confederacy, which was later annexed by Silla. The Samhan kingdom was a loose confederation of walled town city-states. Each had a ruling class with state power, that is army and police, and a Gija priesthood. And this is an example of early slave stage societies with icon remnants of the ATC Gija cult hanging on within the ideology of the emergent class structure. The name of the Jin kingdom polity continued to be used in the name of the Jinhan Confederacy. The name Byonjin is an alternate term for Byonhan. The leader of Mahan continued to call himself the King of Jin, and he also claimed overlordship over all of the Samhan confederations. Mahan itself was the largest and earliest developed of these three confederacies. It consisted of 54 fiefs. In time, one of these conquered the others and became the center of the Baekje kingdom. Mahan was located in the southwest of the Korean Peninsula, covering Jeolla, Cheongcheon, and portions of Gyeonggi. Jinhan consisted of 12 fiefs, one of which conquered the others and became the center of the Silla kingdom. It was located to the east of the Nakdong River Valley. Byonhan consisted of 12 fiefs, one of which conquered the others, and became the Gaya kingdom that was subsequently annexed by Silla. It was located south and west of the Nakdong River Valley. The exact locations and boundaries of the Samhan fiefs and kingdoms changed over time. For what it's worth, the Samgan Sagi says that Mahan was located in the northern region later occupied by Goguryeo, Jinhan in the region later occupied by Silla, and Byonhan in the southwestern region later occupied by Baekje. The earlier Chinese Sangunji places Mahan in the southwest, Jinhan in the southeast, and Byonhan between them. In all cases, villages were built in high mountain valleys where they were relatively secure from attack. Mountain fortress towns were constructed as places of wartime refuge. The minor kingdoms making up the federations covered as much acreage as a modern-day Mayon or township. The introduction of iron technology also facilitated growth in agriculture, as iron tools made the clearing and cultivation of land much easier. It appears that at this time the modern-day Jeolla area emerged as a center of rice production. Based on historical and archaeological records, river and sea routes were the primary means of long-distance transportation and trade. Accordingly, Jinghan and Baonan, with their coastal and river locations, became particularly prominent in national trade. The Samhan witnessed a systematic introduction of iron into the southern Korean Peninsula. The Byeonhan states of the Nakdong River Valley manufactured and exported iron armor and weapons throughout Northeast Asia. National trading ports became international trading ports. Until the rise of Goguryeo, the external relations of Samhan were largely limited to the Chinese commanderies located in the former territory of Gojoseon. The longest standing of these, the Lilang Commandery, maintained separate diplomatic relations with each individual commandery. In the beginning, the Samhan relationships were of the political trading system type. In this system, tribute was ostensibly exchanged for titles or prestige gifts. Official seals identified each village leader's authority to trade with the commandery. After the fall of the Chinese kingdom of Wei, W-E-I, in the 3rd century BC, San Guoji reports that the Lilang Commandery dispensed official seals freely to local commoners that no longer symbolized political authority. The Chinese commanderies also supplied luxury goods and consumed local products. Later, Han Dynasty coins and beads were exchanged for local iron or raw silk, and after the 2nd century AD, as Chinese influence waned, iron ingots came into use as currency for the trade based around Jinhan and Banhan. Now, trade relations also existed with the emergent kingdoms of Japan at this time. Most trade centered on the exchange of ornamental Japanese bronzeware for Korean iron. These trade relations shifted in the 3rd century when the Yamatai Federation of Kyushu gained monopolistic control over Japanese trade with Byeonhan. Goryeo historians identified Meihan, Jinhan, Byeonhan with Goguryeo, Silla, and Bakje, respectively. The term Samhan was synonymous with Samkuk, the 3 kingdoms of Korea. In the late Joseon period, that historical notion came under criticism by an early Silla scholar named Han Bakjeom, who emphasized the linkage between Meihan and Bakje in terms of the geographical location. At any rate, China took over. In AD 642, the powerful Korean general Yan Gaesomun led a coup against gaining complete control over the Goguryeo portion of the peninsula, and in response, Emperor Tang Taizong of China led another campaign against Korea, but was defeated and he retreated. The next Chinese campaign came after the death of the unlucky Tang Taizong. Then his son, Emperor Tang Gaizong, allied with the peninsular kingdom of Silla and invaded Korea once again. So in AD 662, 20 years later, this came to a stalemate and eventual defeat. In AD 666, Yeon Gaesomun died and Korea was thrown into chaos. Korea had been weakened by a succession struggle among the sons and younger brother of Yeon Gaesomun. His eldest son was suborned by China's regime, and his younger brother panicked and decided living under Silla was the better part of valor. In AD 667, a China-Silla alliance mounted a fresh invasion of Korea and conquered it in 668. China and Silla then ended their alliance and fought for control of Korea's slave labor. Silla prevailed over much of the peninsula, although China took control of Korea's northern territories. Then Dae Joyong founded the Korean Mohe Kingdom of Balhae, expelling China from much of Korean territory. At its peak in the 4th century AD, during the reign of King Gungo Chogo, Bakje absorbed all of the Mahan states. It subjugated most of the western Korean peninsula, including the modern provinces of Gyeonggi, Cheongjeong, and Jeolla, as well as part of Hangwei and Gangwon. Bakje acquired Chinese culture and technology through maritime contacts with the southern dynasties during the expansion of its territory. Now, a mercantile bourgeois kingdom arose in the form of Bakje, which was a great maritime power. Its nautical skill made it the Phoenicia of East Asia. And along the way, Bakji was instrumental in spreading Buddhism throughout East Asia, especially to Japan. Bakji transmitted writing with Chinese characters. In fact, Buddhism, iron making, advanced pottery, along with ceremonial burial, was all introduced via Bakji to ancient Japan. The Bakji court eventually retreated to Japan after the Silla-Tang alliance conquered its Korean lands. Bakji was once a great military power on the Korean Peninsula, especially during the time of Gojoseon, but was critically defeated by Gwanggyeto the Great and declined ultimately. Bakji was defeated by a coalition of Silla and Tang forces in AD 660. And that brings us to the Silla kingdom. According to legend, the kingdom of Silla began with the unification of 6 chiefdoms of the Jinhan Confederacy by Gojoseon in 57 BC in the southern area of Korea. Its territory included the present-day port of Busan, and Silla later emerged as a sea power responsible for destroying Japanese pirates during the unified Silla period. Busan, by the way, is the alternative spelling for Busan, which is where General MacArthur was going to land his troops. We'll have a lot more to say about that as we go along. But at any rate, the territory of Southeast Korea included the present-day port city of Busan, and Silla later emerged as a sea power responsible for destroying Japanese pirates during the unified Silla period. These pirates and their land highwayman equivalent are the remnants of what would happen if a feudal lord suddenly lost power and his retainers no longer had a paymaster. So they are not likely to want to go out and become field hands, so they take up piracy and highwayman work. At any rate, Silla artifacts, including unique gold metalwork, show influence from the northern nomadic steppes and Iranian peoples, and especially Persians, with less Chinese influence that are shown by Goguryeo and Bakji. Silla expanded rapidly by occupying the Nakdong River basin and uniting the city-states there. By the 2nd century AD, Silla was a large state occupying and influencing nearby city-states. Silla gained further power when it annexed the Gaya Confederacy in AD 562. Silla often faced pressure from Goguryeo, Bakji, and Japan. At various times, Silla allied and warred with Bakji and Goguryeo. Silla was the smallest and weakest of the 3 kingdoms of Korea. However, its Machiavellian cunning used diplomacy to make opportunistic pacts and alliances with the more powerful Korean kingdoms and eventually Tang China to its great advantage. In AD 660, King Muyol of Silla ordered his armies to attack Bakji. General Kim Yushin, aided by Chinese forces, conquered Bakji. In AD 661, Silla and Tang moved on Goguryeo, but were repelled. King Mumu, son of Muyol and nephew of Kim, launched a campaign in AD 667, and Goguryeo fell in 668. And that takes us to Gaya, a confederacy of bourgeois-dominated fiefs in the Nakdong River Valley of southern Korea. These had evolved from the Yeonhan Confederacy of the Samhan period. Gaya's plains were and are rich in iron, so the manufacture and export of iron tools, along with slave and small proprietor agriculture, supported the workers in the iron plants. In the early centuries, the fiefs were led by Gyeongwon Gaya of the Gimhae region. Later power was exercised by Daigaya in the Goryeo region after the 5th century AD. The Ironburgers were always at war with the 3 kingdoms surrounding them. Consequently, Gaya was ultimately absorbed into Silla in AD 562. The term North-South states refers to later Silla and Balhae, during the time when Silla controlled the majority of the Korean Peninsula, while Balhae expanded into Manchuria. During this time, technology significantly advanced, especially in later Silla. And then we come to Silla again. After the unification wars, China established outposts in the former Goguryeo and began to establish and administer communities in Bakji. Silla attacked Chinese forces in Bakji and northern Korea in AD 671. Tang then invaded Silla in 674, but Silla drove the Tang forces off the peninsula by 676, thus achieving Korean unification. In AD 667, Silla began long-distance trade with the Abbasid Caliphate, that is Abbasid, according to the Persian geographer Ibn Khordadbeh in his Book of Roads and Kingdoms. And I looked that up on Wikipedia and on the internet to see exactly what the extent of that Abbasid Caliphate was, and it was massive. It was the third of the Islamic caliphates to succeed the Islamic prophet Muhammad. The Abbasid monarchy descended from Muhammad's youngest uncle, Abbas ibn al-Muttalib, from whom the dynasty takes its name. It had capitals at Baghdad, Damascus, Samarra, Kufa, Cairo, Raqqa, Anbar, and Abbasid Samarra. In AD 1258, it dissolved after having been the seventh largest empire on the globe, with, at its maximum extent, it covered a land area of 11.1 million square kilometers. So, Silla was in contact with them, especially maritime contact. The Buddhist monasteries, the Bulguksa Temple, the Sekomram Grotto in Korea, the Hwangryongsa Temple, and the Bunwangsa Temple are examples of advanced Korean architecture. Persian writers describe Silla as located in the eastern end of China. They describe it as a beautiful country where there is much gold, majestic cities, and hard-working people, and a culture comparable with Persia. Silla was a prosperous and wealthy country, continuing the maritime prowess of Bakji as the Phoenicia of medieval East Asia. During the 8th and 9th centuries AD, Silla dominated the seas of East Asia. Its maritime merchants conducted trade in Abbasid dinars and many other currencies. Such trade was intense between China, Korea, and Japan. Sillans established trading communities in China, on the Shandong Peninsula, and at the mouth of the Yangtze River. Silla's metropolitan capital, Gyeonggi-was, was the fourth largest city in the world. Many Korean Buddhists gained great fame and contributed to Chinese Buddhism. These included Wonchuk, Wonhyo, Yusang, Musang, and Kim Gokak. The latter was a Silla prince whose influence made Mount Jishua one of the four sacred mountains of Chinese Buddhism. Silla began to experience ruling class conflict between burghers and landed nobles in the late 8th century. As the 9th century unfolded, descendants of the former Bakji established Hubakji. In the north, rebels revived Goguryeo, beginning the later Three Kingdoms period. Silla lasted for 267 years until King Gyeongsun surrendered the country to Goguryeo in AD 935 after 992 years and 56 monarchs. Now that brings us to the end of our discussion of the origins of the Korean slave stage after having evolved from primitive communism through its chiefdom transition. In the next lecture we'll talk about feudalism in Asia. After that, capitalism in Asia, and finally the communist government in North Korea.